Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. And today, Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan both spoke to the media in Palm Beach, Florida for the NFL owners' meetings. And they had some very interesting things to say about the quarterback position, about the acquisition of DK Metcalf, and some other players here at the Pittsburgh Steelers roster for 2025. So today, I'm going to be sharing my takeaways from those interviews and media availabilities. But before we get into that, man, we've got some business to take care of, all right? We cannot lose this sub-battle for the month of March in the AFC North, all right? And right now we're sitting good when it comes to the Ravens and the Bengals, who are several hundred subscribers behind us. But right now we are just 9 subscribers behind the Browns report in total subs gained for the month of March. It's been an awesome month, man, with the Aaron Rodgers stuff, with free agency. You guys have been phenomenal. But new viewers, we are counting on you guys right now to click that subscribe button. Help us get us over the top here. We have not lost an interdivision sub-battle. And right now the Browns report is telling their fans, do not let them catch us, all right? So I know for a fact they're going to add like 30 subscribers on today's show. We got to catch them. Let's win the month of March. Click that subscribe button right now. So we'll start with my takeaways here, which the first one is Rodgers signing soon? And not only, is Rodgers working out with DK Metcalf, they're in LA posting the videos on social media, talking with guys like Pat Freiermuth and Arthur Smith, and Mike Tomlin for that matter quite frequently. But it certainly seems like Tomlin knows something in terms of the Aaron Rodgers timeline, and he seems to think he's going to choose to play for the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is what Tomlin had to say on the Rodgers saga in Palm Beach this week. Aaron came to spend the day with us. We had an awesome day. For a couple of guys like ourselves, me and Aaron, to be in the league as long as we have, to be familiar with one another, is still no substitute for spending time together and bouncing ideas off of one another and getting to know one another in a more intimate way beyond competition. And then when he was asked during his media availability if Rodgers gave him a timeline, he said, we've had some discussions, but I'll leave that between he and I. And then he had a big smirk on his face indicating that he's pretty optimistic he's going to choose the Pittsburgh Steelers. So what it all sounds like here, guys, is Rodgers has got a timeline, and he's going to make a decision at some point. He's discussed with the Steelers when he's comfortable making that decision. Who knows if it's 10 minutes from now or 10 days from now or 10 weeks from now. But whatever that timeline is, it seems like the Steelers are cool with that. And as Jeremy Fowler reported this weekend, the Steelers seem to have some sort of quote-unquote loose assurance that Rodgers will eventually be the starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm not going to spend my entire time on this video talking Rodgers and DK. We've already put out a whole video breaking down their workout, all that different stuff in LA this weekend. So if you want to see my thoughts on that, you can check out our Rodgers video from earlier today. I'll put the link to that in the comments and description of today's show. Then we'll move on to Omar Khan, what he said about the quarterback plan. He says, we always go into training camp with 4 quarterbacks, and we have 2 under contract right now. So all options are on the table through free agency, trade, or draft. So Khan pretty much said that the team will for sure add another veteran quarterback before camp. It sounds like that quarterback's going to be Aaron Rodgers. But if they strike out on Rodgers, fully expect this team to get some sort of other veteran quarterback, whether that be Ryan Tannehill, whether that be somebody else, and that somebody else could be Kirk Cousins, according to ESPN's Adam Schefter, who said that Cousins could be Pittsburgh's emergency quarterback option if they somehow strike out on Aaron Rodgers. That certainly seems like a very low possibility at this point. Certainly seems like Rodgers will eventually sign on the dotted line. But I would say the 2 names to watch out for is, in terms of veteran options, if they miss out on Rodgers, is Kirk Cousins, number 1, and Ryan Tannehill, number 2. Another takeaway that I had from some of the media availability we had this week is that Steelers are looking for a long-term solution at quarterback, and they're fully cognizant that they need to get somebody for the long term either this year or next year. Omar Khan said this during his press conference today. At some point, we have to find a long-term solution at quarterback. I'll say that might happen this year. It could happen next year. But in the meantime, we're going to keep doing whatever we can to win a championship this year in 2025. And, when you talk about Omar Khan and he said at the Combine, he believes that this team and this roster is capable of winning a Super Bowl, which is why they invested in an older Russell Wilson last year. That's why they're investing and waiting on Aaron Rodgers, who's 41 years old. They still believe that those guys, especially Rodgers now, is capable of delivering this team a championship in the short term while they try to win a Super Bowl for Cam Hayward. But they are also cognizant that they need to get a long-term answer at quarterback whenever Cam Hayward does retire and they begin to shift the focus of this team to more of a more long-term type of situation. And then speaking of the long-term solution at quarterback, Jalen Milroe is certainly somebody that's been talked about quite a bit among Steelers media, but there was somebody that did not talk about Jalen Milroe at Palm Beach this week, and that is Mike Tomlin. This is what Coach T had to say about some of the quarterbacks that they have met with in this year's class. Last week was a big week for us. We went to Texas, Ohio State, and Notre Dame, for example. Didn't mention Alabama there. Said we had a chance to meet with a significant number of them in Indy, and now we're on the pro day circuit. The class doesn't seem to be devoid of talent. I like a lot of the guys I've met, not only in terms of their tangible qualities, but their intangible qualities. I feel really good about the trajectory of the group and how we're going to place them on the board. So personally, guys, I think that the Milroe omission is telling. All right, they spent a lot of time in Tuscaloosa during that pro day, and they even had dinner with Jalen Milroe and others at the Tuscaloosa pro day the night before. He ended up running, depending on the time you believe, a high 4.3 or a low 4.4 in his 40-yard dash, which is a blazing time for a quarterback. But Mike Tomlin is somebody that likes to kind of get the media off the scent of what the Steelers want to do. Ever since the media was on his ass about their interest in Najee Harris all those years back, ever since then, he's really made it a point to, direct the media's attention somewhere else so that he can use some sleight of hand, and then, all of a sudden, here we go. We've seen this with the quarterback situation where they tell us, we're interested in Mason Rudolph, or, we're interested in bringing back Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. And then, bam, they bring in Russell Wilson. Or, bam, they go after Aaron Rodgers. Like, they do this sleight of hand, and they like to get the media off their scent. They like to put out kind of these narratives. So by pointing out Texas, Notre Dame, and Ohio State, not Alabama, might be something there where he's leaving out Jalen Milroe because he doesn't want people to think that the Steelers are really targeting Milroe potentially close to the top of their draft board this year. Now, Adam Schefter did say, in terms of drafting Milroe, say in round one, is that the Steelers are unlikely to take a quarterback in round one, especially if they bring in a guy like Aaron Rodgers. And you got to fill running back, you got to fill defensive tackle, you got other team needs you want to address. I'm not sure how much sense it would make to reach on a quarterback in round one, especially if you have Aaron Rodgers in hand. So Schefter thinks that the Steelers taking a quarterback in round one is unlikely at this point, and I would have to agree with him. That is, if the Steelers do end up locking up Aaron Rodgers. So what say you guys? Let me know down there in the comment section. What is the percent chance that Pittsburgh takes a quarterback in round one this year? I won't say it's 0. I would say it's relatively low, though. Give me a scale of 0 to 100 of the percent chance the Steelers take a quarterback this year. This will be the pinned comment on today's show, so YouTube will throw you an ad break here in just a couple of seconds. And when that happens, take advantage of that time by answering today's pinned question with a number between 0 and 100. Fourth takeaway I took away from Tomlin's media availability this week is that he expects DK Metcalf to have an impact on the offense, not just with his presence there, but also make an impact on the other players in this wide receiver group as well. It's what Tomlin had to say about DK's skill set. For someone that organizes defensive efforts for the larger part of my career, I can't underscore the significance of a guy like DK. It's not only the plays that he makes, it's the schematics that guy like him controls. I just know that when you're playing DK Metcalf, it controls how you call coverage. There's a statistical component of his contributions, but there's also an intangible component of his contributions that get distributed across an offensive unit to others that's equally as exciting. He's a difference maker. He's really significant. There's very little on a football field from a wide receiver perspective that he can't do. He's got short game. He's got long game. He's a combat catch guy. He's got run after, and he's a devastating run blocker. And we're going to use all of those talents. And that gets me fired up, man, for this era of Steelers wide receiver play with DK Metcalf leading the way. Because, yes, having a true number one wide receiver in the room is awesome, but it's also exciting for the other guys in this room because instead of going up against number one corners, George Pickens gets to go up against number two corners. Instead of going up against number two corners, Calvin Austin III gets to go up against number three corners, right? I like George Pickens a lot more as a number two receiver than as a number one, and I like Calvin Austin III a lot more as a wide receiver 3 than as a wide receiver 2. So not only do you add a true number one presence in DK Metcalf, but you also make the other players in the room better. And I completely agree with Mike Tomlin's evaluation of the situation right there. And I think it's absolutely worth giving up a second-round pick, especially if your focus is winning on the short term before Cam Hayward retires. Now, before we get into the rest of my takeaways from Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin's media availability in Palm Beach this week, let's have a word from our sponsor here at Fanatics, where you guys can get a DK Metcalf Steelers jersey officially licensed by the National Football League from our friends at Fanatics today when you go to chatsports.com/DK. And, of course, we know DK Metcalf, he's going to be awesome in the black and gold, man. He's going to be wearing number 4, looking sharp. If you want to be looking sharp, too, wearing his number and his name on your back, go to chatsports.com/DK. Also, when you use our link and you make a purchase, Fanatics sends us part of the proceeds to help us keep this content free for you guys. We really do appreciate all of your support. All right, now let's get to the rest of the takeaways here, and we'll stick with the wide receiver position, where I think that the signs do point to George Pickens sticking around, all right? And the reason for this is, a lot of people have been saying, oh, you trade George Pickens because he and DK Metcalf are like the same player. Well, Mike Tomlin kind of refuted that, saying they're both downfield capable, but they're different people. DK is a big man, George Pickens is a tall man, and there's a difference. And I completely agree with Mike Tomlin on this. Once again, I think he hits the nail on the head, right? There's a difference between somebody that's tall and big versus somebody that is just tall. And I think George Pickens, as a number 2 receiver on the outside, certainly is still capable of winning down the field in the ways that he won in previous seasons with the Pittsburgh Steelers. But he's also a little bit lighter, which could open up his route tree a little bit. It could open him up to play in the slot. It can open him up to play still on the outside at Z. Do a lot of different things with George Pickens that you weren't able to do before because he was your true number 1 weapon. And honestly, he was your only true dynamic threat as a receiving weapon out there for your offense. So the addition of DK Metcalf, like I said earlier, it makes George Pickens better. And I think that DK and George Pickens can absolutely coexist together. And I think that they would. And I think that they would become one of the best wide receiver duos in all of football, especially with Aaron Rodgers throwing on ball. Then we get to another one here where the offensive line plans seem to be revealed. And it really reflects what I've been saying on this show for weeks. This is what Tomlin had to say about the offensive line. Talent acquisition is just one thing. Talent development is the next step for us. We've made the commitment over the last several years to acquire some pretty awesome young talent at that position, talking the offensive line. Those guys have proven their capability. I'm excited about the prospects of continuing to move forward with that group individually and collectively, knowing the growth that has happened and will continue to happen, not only for the individuals within the group, but the longer they play together. So this is kind of one where I'm going to take a little bit of a victory lap because I've been saying on this show for weeks, months at this point, that if you're expecting the Steelers to get an offensive tackle in free agency or trade for somebody or add an offensive guard to start, you're going to be disappointed. They spent a first-round pick on Broderick Jones to play left tackle. He hasn't had the chance to play there, so they're going to give him the chance in 2025. Troy Fautano, they drafted him in the first round last year, got hurt. They're not going to replace him. Mason McCormick, a guy that they really liked coming out of South Dakota State last year. The plan was always for him to start at right guard this season and let James Daniels walk. And, of course, you got Zach Frazier and Isaac Seumalo, who don't have question marks as far as I'm concerned. All right, so you got your starting 5 offensive linemen. They've made the investment along that group. Like Tomlin says, though, the next step is player development. Can Broderick Jones, Mason McCormick, Troy Fautano prove their worth and prove that the investment that the Steelers made in them is worth it? And I think that there's certainly a chance they could do that. With Pat Meyer returning, I think there's a lesser chance that they do that. But there's no question, guys. Broderick Jones, Troy Fautano specifically, as first-round picks, have a high level of pedigree and promise to their game. And then Mason McCormick, in my opinion, came out last year. I had a round 3 grade on him because I loved his physical potential. I think after a full offseason, he could become a legit starter in this league. So it's going to be very interesting to see what ends up happening along the offensive line for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think that there's reason to have hope for this offensive line, but I can certainly see why some fans are certainly pessimistic that this group is going to be able to turn it around in 2025 after so many years of promise and failure along this group. So let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section. Will this offensive line be better in 2025 than it was last year? Give me a yes or a no down there in the comment section. I think it will be. I think Broderick will be more comfortable at left tackle. Mason will have a full offseason to train at right guard as opposed to the expedited offseason he had last year after being drafted by this team. And hopefully Fautano stays healthy. If those 3 things happen, guys, I think this group has a chance to be good and good for a very long time. So give me a yes or no to this question down there in the comment section. Another takeaway that I had here is that perhaps the Pittsburgh Steelers aren't going to be using a true nose tackle any longer, all right? And the reason why I think that I've kind of had this shift in thinking here is because of what Tomlin had to say about Keeanu Benton and his versatility yesterday. He said Benton's got versatility, but that's why we took him that high, particularly in today's game. Not a lot of nose play in today's game based on matchups and so forth. I think we spend about 80% of our time in sub-package football, talking about nickel or dime, and so his versatility is an asset to him and to us where he's not reduced by offensive personnel that's potentially on the field or not. And perhaps we've been looking at this position all wrong, guys, because traditionally the Steelers do run more base 3-4 formations than anybody else in football, where they have 2 outside linebackers and then they have 3 interior linemen at the nose, at the 3 technique, and at the 5 technique. And right now, with their kind of traditional 3-man interior look, you'd have Montravius Adams at the nose, Keeanu at the 3 tech, and then Cam Hayward at the 5 tech. But with so much sub-package football being played, and even the Steelers are starting to make this transition, you're seeing a lot more 4 down fronts. And with that, you got Highsmith and Watt on the edge, just like in your normal base, but you only have 2 interior linemen where you got Keeanu and you've got Cam in the middle. And those 2 guys are definitely your starters at those 2 positions. Now, you got guys like Ekuale in there. You got Loudermilk. You got Montravius Adams to roll in there. But with the Steelers living in 4-man fronts 80% of the time, perhaps the Steelers are okay not having a true nose tackle because Keeanu can play there when they do go to their base formations. But then also, when they go to the 4-man front, they've got their 2 bona fide starters in Benton and Hayward with a bunch of guys that they like to rotate in to the front. Now, I do think that the Steelers will still probably take a defensive tackle, and they could even take one early. Cam Hayward is certainly not going to be that second man in the 4-man front for very much longer. 2 more years is the timetable for that. So they probably definitely want to get somebody for the future that can contribute not only now, but 2 years down the line when Cam is no longer a part of this football team. So I do expect the Steelers to be investing in defensive tackle at some point during this NFL draft. It's just a matter of what round and when they pull the trigger on that player. Then we get to my final takeaway here is that Daniel Ekuale, one of the free agents that they brought in here at defensive tackle, his role was kind of revealed, and what the Steelers liked about him has been revealed by head coach Mike Tomlin, with Coach T saying this about the new Steelers defensive interior lineman. This is a guy that really plays blocks and recognizes run schemes extremely well. I expect him to be an anchor point for us in that regard to control the line of scrimmage, particularly in run-down circumstances. So essentially, Ekuale is going to cover all the bases for the Pittsburgh Steelers at defensive tackle. All right? Like, I honestly think when they go to their base 3-4 looks, they're going to put Benton at the nose, and then they're going to have Ekuale play probably the 5 technique with Cam playing the 3. And, you know, with Ekuale's ability to stop the run, I think that's why he's being brought in here. He's not much of a disruptor in terms of being a pass rusher. He is a run-stuffing specialist. That is why he is here. And then along with the guy that they end up drafting this year, that's going to be a pretty darn deep and good defensive line for the Pittsburgh Steelers heading into the 2025 season. So I said it when they signed Ekuale that this is somebody that they're bringing in for run support. Mike Tomlin confirmed that in Palm Beach this week, which is why you click that subscribe button here at Steelers Talk, because we were right about the offensive line. We were right about Ekuale being a run stuffer. We were right about Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers' interest in Aaron Rodgers before anybody else had it. Everybody was saying Justin Fields or Russell Wilson. We were saying Aaron Rodgers. That's why you click that subscribe button. That's why you join the Steelers Talk family, so you always get the inside scoop surrounding the black and gold.